So, I signed the papers on a Tuesday morning, and by Friday afternoon, the keys were mine. My son called 11 times between Thursday night and Saturday morning. My daughter-in-law called twice. I let them go to voicemail, poured myself a glass of Chardonnay, and sat on my new balcony, watching the sun go down over the lake. The water was copper and gold, and a pair of ducks were making slow, lazy circles near the reeds. I thought about how I hadn't watched a sunset in almost 2 years. Not really watched one. Not the way you do when you have nowhere else to be and no one asking you to do something else with your eyes. I should back up. My husband passed away in March of the year before last. 29 years together, and then one morning he didn't wake up. The doctor said it was his heart, which I thought was almost too poetic, because he had the biggest one I'd ever known. We had a house in Clarksville, Tennessee. A yellow Craftsman with a porch swing, and a garden I'd been tending since 1997. But after he was gone, the house felt less like a home and more like a museum of a life I used to have. Every room held something that made my chest tighten. His reading glasses on the nightstand, his coffee mug still in the cabinet, the indent in his side of the mattress that never quite went away. My son called me every Sunday. He and his wife lived in Nashville, 40 minutes away, in a large house in a newer development with a 3-car garage and a homeowners association that sent letters if your grass grew half an inch too tall. They had 2 children, my grandson, who was 12, and my granddaughter, who had just turned 9. After my husband passed, my son started suggesting, gently at first, then with more persistence, that I come and stay with them. "Mom, you shouldn't be alone in that house," he said one Sunday in May. "We have the space. The kids would love having you around. Just come try it for a few months." I hesitated. I had lived independently my entire adult life. I had been a high school English teacher for 31 years. I raised my son largely on my own during the years my husband traveled for work. I was not, by any measure, a woman who needed to be managed. But grief does something to your sense of direction. It takes the map you've been using and quietly folds it up, and you find yourself standing in the middle of a road you don't recognize, not sure which way leads home. I sold the Clarksville house in August. I kept every cent of the proceeds in my own account, $284,000, plus my pension and my teacher's retirement fund. I want to be clear about that, because it matters later. I never once mixed my money with theirs, never offered to pay rent, never agreed to contribute to any household expense beyond occasionally buying groceries. My son never asked. I told myself that was love. I moved into their guest room on a Saturday. It was a nice room, large, with a window seat and its own bathroom and a closet big enough to hold my things. My daughter-in-law had put fresh flowers on the dresser. My grandchildren ran in and hugged me and immediately began arguing over who got to show me their bedrooms first. For about 3 weeks, it felt like it might actually work. The first sign was small enough that I almost talked myself out of noticing it. My daughter-in-law had a particular way of moving through a room when I was already in it, a kind of efficient redirection. Like a stream finding a way around a stone. She would come into the kitchen while I was having my morning coffee, open the refrigerator, close it, check her phone, and then say something like, "Oh, Mom, I was going to reorganize those cabinets today, so if you could maybe take your coffee to the living room?" And I would go. Because she was busy. Because I was a guest. Because I told myself that was gracious. My son worked long hours. He was in corporate finance. And by the time he got home most evenings, dinner was already done, and the children were in the early stages of winding down toward bed. I would see him for perhaps an hour each night. He was tired in the way that people are when they have given most of themselves to something before they get home. And I didn't want to add to that weight, so I kept my concerns to myself. And I helped where I could, and I tried to shrink into the shape of someone who didn't take up too much room. I drove my grandchildren to school on Tuesdays and Thursdays when my daughter-in-law had early meetings. I helped my grandson with his history papers. I sat with my granddaughter for 45 minutes every Tuesday evening while she practiced the piano pieces that frustrated her most. My daughter-in-law thanked me for all of it in the way that people thank a useful appliance briefly without looking up. Around the 6-month mark, something shifted. It was nothing dramatic at first. A comment here, a sigh there. She began talking about her system, the way she organized the pantry, scheduled the cleaning service, managed the children's calendars with a precision that seemed designed to communicate that any deviation was a problem. One afternoon, I rearranged the Tupperware cabinet because the lids kept falling out every time I opened it. She came home, opened the cabinet, and stood there for a long moment before saying, "I had a reason for the way that was organized." I apologized and put everything back the way it had been. 3 lids fell on the floor while I was doing it. My grandson was the one who started telling me things. Not maliciously, he was 12. And didn't yet have the architecture for that kind of calculation. He would sit next to me on the couch while I read and just talk, the way children do when they trust you. He told me that his mother had said I was old-fashioned to one of her friends on the phone. He told me that his parents had argued one night after he was supposed to be asleep, and that his father had said, "She's not going to be here forever. Just give her some grace." And his mother had said something he couldn't quite hear. I thanked him for telling me and changed the subject to his soccer team. And later that night, I lay in the guest room, looking at the ceiling and feeling something cold and quiet settle into my chest. But I still didn't fully understand until a Wednesday afternoon in February. I had come back early from my book club. We'd only met for an hour because 2 members had conflicts, and I came in through the side door that opens into the hallway near the home office. My daughter-in-law was on a video call. The door was slightly open, the way it often was when she worked from home, and I heard her voice before I saw anything. I should have made a noise, said something to announce myself, kept walking. Instead, I stopped. I don't know why. Some part of me must have already known. "She means well, I know," my daughter-in-law was saying, in the careful tone of someone who is only performing restraint. "But it's like she wants to be consulted on every single thing. Last week, she told Tyler that the college list I made for him was too limited. He's 12, Caroline. He's 12 years old and she's filling his head with ideas about intellectual ambition, and I can't keep doing this. She doesn't understand how anything works anymore. She's stuck in this mindset from 30 years ago, and it's starting to affect the kids. Emma asked me last week why we don't read actual books instead of watching things, and I just knew, that came from her." There was a pause. Her sister said something I couldn't make out. "I know," my daughter-in-law said again. "I know. My husband loves her. But I'm the one here all day. I'm the one managing this house. And honestly, I've started to feel like a caregiver, and I didn't sign up for that. I don't know how to say that to him without it becoming a whole thing." I moved down the hallway. Quietly, slowly. I went to my room and sat on the edge of the bed with my hands in my lap, and I stayed like that for a long time. She doesn't understand how anything works anymore. I had spent 31 years teaching other people's children how to think, how to read a text carefully, and ask what it meant, and what it didn't say, and what it was afraid to say. I had sat with teenagers in the hardest years of their lives and helped them find language for things they didn't have words for yet. I had read 10,000 essays and written 10,000 sets of comments in the margins, and stood at the front of a room and made people fall in love with books they were sure they would hate. I had buried my husband and sold my home and started my life over in someone else's house at 64 years old because I loved my son and wanted to be close to my grandchildren. I didn't understand how anything works anymore. I sat on the edge of that bed until the light changed. Then I got up, washed my face, and started making a list. The first thing I did was call my friend Carol, who I had known since we taught together at the same school in the 90s. Carol had retired 2 years before me and had moved into a 55-plus active community just outside of Brentwood. She had told me about it when I moved in with my son, had said gently that I might want to keep it in mind, and I had smiled and told her I was sure it would be fine. I called her that Wednesday evening from my car, parked in the driveway so no one could hear me. "Tell me about your place again," I said. Carol was quiet for exactly 1 second. "Helen," she said, "I'll pick you up Saturday morning." The community was called Willow Creek. and it was nothing like the beige, fluorescent-lit facility I had been unconsciously picturing. It sat on 60 acres of rolling Tennessee land, with walking trails and a proper lake with docks and a community center that had a painting studio and a pottery room and a library with actual good books. The condos were 2-story, bright, with high ceilings and large windows. The people Carol introduced me to were sharp and funny and busy in the way that people are when they have chosen their own lives deliberately. I told the leasing agent I was interested. She walked me through 3 available units. The second one had a corner balcony that looked directly over the water, a kitchen with a gas range, and a second room I could use as a study. I stood at that kitchen window for a long time looking out. "What's the timeline if I wanted to move forward quickly?" I asked. "We could have you in within 3 weeks, she said. I said I'd be in touch. I drove home very carefully and very quietly, and I did not say a word to anyone. The next morning, I called my attorney. I had used the same woman for years. She had handled the sale of my Clarksville house, and she knew my financial situation in detail. I explained what I wanted to do. She asked a few questions, made some notes, and told me she could have preliminary paperwork ready within the week. I also told her I wanted to revisit my will. She didn't ask why. I appreciated that. Over the following days, I moved with a deliberateness that surprised even me. I contacted Willow Creek and put down a deposit on the corner unit. I scheduled movers for the following Saturday, which happened to be the same day my son and daughter-in-law had planned to take the children to her parents' house in Chattanooga for the weekend. I had helped plan that trip 3 weeks earlier, had even offered to water their plants while they were gone. The symmetry of it was not lost on me. I had very little to move, as it turned out. When I had sold the Clarksville house, I had put most of my furniture in a storage unit rather than crowd their home with it. My son had thought I was being considerate. I had thought I was being practical. In the end, it was both. I spent 3 evenings in my room packing the things that were mine, my books, my photographs, the small things I had brought from the yellow house. I fit everything into 14 boxes. I moved efficiently and quietly after everyone was asleep. On Friday night, my grandson came to find me while I was reading. He sat next to me and was quiet for a moment. "Grandma," he said, "are you going somewhere?" I looked at him. He was perceptive in the way that quiet children often are, the kind who are always taking in more than anyone realizes. "I'm going to have my own place," I told him. "A beautiful one, near a lake. You'll come visit." He was quiet for a moment. "Is it because of something that happened?" "It's because I'm 64 years old," I said, "and I have my whole life still in front of me, and I'd like to live it." He thought about that. Then he nodded, slowly, the way his grandfather used to nod when something made sense to him on a deeper level than just the surface. "Okay," he said. "I'll visit." "I know you will," I said. My son's family left for Chattanooga at 9 in the morning on Saturday. I hugged my grandchildren for a long time. My daughter-in-law said, "We'll be back Sunday evening. Help yourself to anything in the kitchen." And I said thank you, and she went to the car. My son hugged me and said he'd call Sunday. I told him that sounded good. The moving truck arrived at 11. By 4 in the afternoon, my boxes were inside the Willow Creek condo, and the movers were gone. And I was standing in the middle of my own living room for the first time in over a year and a half. My storage furniture had been delivered that morning. My reading chair, my dining table, the bookshelf my husband had built for me, the year we moved into the yellow house. I put my books up that afternoon, in alphabetical order, the way I've always kept them. With no one suggesting they might look better arranged by color, Carol came by at 6 with a bottle of wine and a pot of her corn chowder, and we sat on my balcony until it was fully dark. The ducks were on the water. The lake was still. "How do you feel?" Carol asked. "Like myself," I said. "Exactly like myself." My son called Sunday evening. I let it ring twice, then answered, "Mom." His voice had that quality it gets when he is trying to stay calm and it costs him something. "Where are you?" "I'm at home," I said. "What does that mean?" "Your things are gone." "Where are you living?" I moved into a condominium in Brentwood, I told him. It's a wonderful place. Beautiful views of the lake. I'm very happy. There was a silence on the line that lasted long enough for me to take a sip of my wine. Mom, why didn't you tell us? We would have helped you move. We could have talked about this. I've been talking for quite a long time, I said, very gently. I'm not sure anyone was listening. Another silence. Then, did something happen? I considered for a brief moment, telling him everything. The hallway conversation. The words that had settled into me like cold water. The 8 months of being quietly redirected out of rooms. Thanked like an appliance. Managed like a logistical inconvenience. I thought about it carefully. Nothing happened, I said. I simply decided that I would like to have my own home. I'm 64, not 84. I have plenty of life left, and I intend to live it well. He was quiet for a long time. We wanted you with us. I know you did, I said, and I meant it. I believed my son had wanted that, genuinely, and I love you for it. But I need my own space. I think we all do, actually. My daughter-in-law did not call me. That told me something, and I filed it quietly away. The first month at Willow Creek was extraordinary, in the specific way that small freedoms are extraordinary when you have been without them long enough to forget what they feel like. I woke up when I wanted to. I made my coffee strong, the way I like it. Without anyone commenting, I reorganized my kitchen the way it made sense to me, and no one rearranged it. I joined the painting class on Wednesday evenings and discovered that I had opinions about color I had apparently been suppressing for years. I walked the trails every morning, sometimes with Carol, sometimes alone, and I thought about whatever I wanted to think about. I called my grandchildren every few days. My grandson called me back most of the time. My granddaughter called me once on a Tuesday evening to tell me about a book she had started and to ask if I had read it. I had. We talked for 35 minutes. My son came to visit 2 weeks after I moved in. He came alone, on a Sunday afternoon, and I made tea, and we sat at my dining table, and he looked around the condo with an expression I recognized from when he was a boy and had encountered something he hadn't expected, something that made him recalibrate. "It's really nice, Mom," he said. He sounded surprised, and then looked mildly embarrassed at his own surprise. "It is," I agreed. He turned his coffee mug in his hands for a moment. "I'm sorry if it felt like if you didn't feel welcome with us." "I didn't know you felt that way." I looked at my son. He had his father's eyes and his father's way of sitting with his shoulders slightly rounded when he felt guilty about something. I loved him very completely, and without condition. The way that a fact exists before you have words for it. I felt very welcome, I said carefully. Your children made me feel loved every single day. And so did you. But there is a difference between being welcome and being at home. And that house was not my home. He absorbed that. Did something happen with my wife? I thought about the hallway again. I thought about the words that had found me. I thought about what it would cost him to hear them, and what it would cost his marriage. And I thought about my grandchildren who loved their mother and needed her to be intact. I simply needed my own space, I said, for the second time. That's the whole truth. He looked at me for a long moment, and I held his gaze. And I think he understood that there was more beneath what I was saying, but that I was choosing not to say it. And that was itself a form of love. Okay, he said. He nodded slowly. Okay, Mom. We talked for 2 more hours after that. We talked about his father. We talked about the children. He told me that my granddaughter had asked him why Grandma left, and he had said that Grandma had found a beautiful place of her own, and my granddaughter had said, like Grandma's own kingdom? And my son had laughed and said, yes, exactly like that. I had to look at my hands for a moment because my eyes were doing something embarrassing. Before he left, he hugged me at the door for a long time. Can I bring the kids next weekend? He asked. I already bought an air mattress for the study, I said. He laughed. It was his father's laugh. I had missed it more than I knew. My grandchildren came on Saturday. My grandson wanted to walk the trails, and then sit with me in the pottery studio, where he made something he described as a bowl and I described as a contemporary art piece. My granddaughter discovered the library and spent 40 minutes selecting books with the seriousness of a professional curator. I told her they had a program where she could borrow books as long as she came back to return them, and she looked at me with such sincere joy that I wanted to frame it. In the evening, my daughter-in-law came to pick them up. She came inside for the first time. She stood in my living room and looked around with careful, controlled eyes, taking in the bookshelves and the reading chair and the painting I had done in Wednesday class, all blues and greens, the lake as I remembered it the first time I saw it hanging on the wall beside the window. "It's lovely," she said. Her voice was even, but something in it was different from the month before. Quieter. "Thank you," I said. "I think so too." We did not have a conversation. We were not ready for that, and I had no desire to rush it. But when she called the children to get their coats, she turned back and said, "The kids really love coming here." "I love having them," I said. There was a pause in which, I think, a number of things were thought by both of us, and none of them were said. "Well," she said. "Thank you." "Of course," I said. I closed the door and stood in my own living room and listened to the particular silence of a space that belongs entirely to you. Not emptiness. There is a difference, but the quiet that comes when every object in a room was chosen by you, placed by you, kept or discarded by your own authority. The silence of a woman who is no longer managing herself into a smaller shape to fit someone else's space. I went to the kitchen and turned on the radio and made dinner, and I hummed along to something I hadn't heard in years. And the smell of garlic in my pan was exactly what garlic should smell like in a kitchen that is yours. A few weeks later, I sat down with my attorney and we finalized the updated will. I will not catalog everything I changed or didn't change. Those are private matters between me and my own sense of fairness, and I arrived at decisions I feel at peace with. What I will say is that they reflected the relationships in my life as they actually are, not as I once hoped they might be. I made provisions for my grandchildren that ensured their education, regardless of any other circumstances. I made adjustments that surprised my attorney, who asked once if I was certain and accepted my answer when I said I was. My son does not know the specifics. I expect he will someday. I am not afraid of that conversation. Spring came to Willow Creek in stages. First the redbuds along the walking trail, then the dogwoods, then finally the whole long warmth of April spreading across the lake and turning everything easy and green. I painted the dogwoods in my Wednesday class. My instructor, a woman named Patricia who had spent 20 years as a graphic designer and spoke about color with a precision I found deeply satisfying, told me I had a natural instinct for light. I told her I'd had 30 years of practice looking at things carefully. She laughed and said it showed. My grandson was on the honor roll that semester. He called to tell me before he told his parents, which I told him was flattering and also probably not the right order of operations. He laughed and said I sounded like his teacher, and I said his teacher was probably a very smart person. My granddaughter finished all 4 library books and came back for more. She had opinions about each of them, strong, specific, sometimes wrong, but formed independently and defended with conviction. I told her she should write them down. She said she didn't know how to start. I told her that was the only problem with writing, and that the solution was to start anyway with whatever sentence came first, and that the rest would follow. She called me 2 days later to read me the first paragraph of something she was writing about her dog. It was extraordinary. I didn't say that because I am her grandmother and therefore biased, although I am. I said it because it was true, and she deserved to hear true things. My son and I have dinner every other Sunday now, sometimes with the whole family, and sometimes just the 2 of us. And we talk differently than we used to, more directly, with less of the careful sidestep that years of managing each other's comfort had built between us. He told me once, over pasta and a glass of red, that he thinks the arrangement is better, that having me here, nearby but separate, is better for everyone. He said it in the tone of a man making a small confession, and I said that I agreed entirely, and we both lifted our glasses. My daughter-in-law and I are not close, and I don't expect that we will be in the way that some mothers and daughters-in-law are. But she came to my condo with my son for Easter, and she brought an orchid, which I thanked her for, and at one point during the afternoon, she asked me about the painting on my wall, the blue-green one, and I told her about the Wednesday class and the lake view, and she listened with a fullness that felt, for the first time, entirely genuine. "You seem really happy here," she said. "I am," I said simply. She nodded. Something in her settled. I have enough experience with people to know that she had expected something from me in that moment. An edge. A reference to the past. Some small accounting for the distance between us, and when it didn't come, she didn't know quite what to do with its absence. I left her with it. I have found that giving people room to sit quietly with the things they haven't said is more useful than saying the things yourself. In June, I started a memoir writing class in the community center on Thursday mornings. 8 people, notebooks, coffee that was better than it had any right to be. Our instructor asked us on the first day to write down the moment we felt most fully like ourselves. Not the proudest moment, not the happiest, but the most authentic. I thought about standing in my own kitchen with the radio on and the garlic in the pan. I thought about my reading chair with a book and absolute quiet. I thought about walking the trail in the early morning with the mist still on the lake and no one needing anything from me. I wrote about the Tuesday morning, 2 weeks after I moved in, when I woke at 6 and made coffee and took it to the balcony in my robe and sat there until 8, watching the ducks and the changing light and the small progress of the morning, with no itinerary and no apology and no one in the next room making me feel like a guest in my own life. I wrote about what it felt like to have my own address, my own key, my own cabinet, with the Tupperware lids, arranged exactly the way I wanted them. I wrote about being 64 years old and understanding, perhaps for the first time, that the years ahead belonged entirely to me. My instructor read my paragraph aloud to the class. She didn't ask permission. She just read it. And when she finished, there was a moment of silence that was better than applause. The woman across from me, who had told me her name was Barbara and that she had moved in after her husband's death 3 years ago, looked at me and nodded once, sharply, with the expression of someone who has recognized something true. That evening, I called my son, not because anything had happened, not because I needed anything, just because I wanted to hear his voice, and because I could call out of love now, without the weight of proximity and obligation blurring the thing. He answered on the second ring and said, "Mom, how are you?" And I told him I was well. I told him I had started a writing class and that I had a story I was working on. He asked what it was about. "A woman who figured out something important," I said. "What did she figure out?" I looked out at the lake through the glass. The light was going gold. "That dignity," I said, "is not something anyone can give you. You have to claim it yourself." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That sounds like a good story, Mom." "I think it is," I said. I poured the last of my wine and stayed on the balcony until the stars came out, one by one, taking their time, arriving in exactly the order they chose.